Let's just dive right into this explainer. We're looking at the dramatic collapse and reordering of the late Qing Dynasty, but we're doing it a little differently. We aren't up in the ivory towers or inside the general's tents. Actually, we're exploring this incredibly turbulent era through the intimate and honestly brutal lens of a lowly palace eunuch. It's this wild story that perfectly weaves together personal survival, imperial destruction, and the rise of literally one of history's most formidable women.
So think about this for a second. How does an empire actually survive its absolute darkest hour? We usually think of history in terms of these sweeping battles or grand treaties signed by emperors. But what if the survival of an entire empire rested, at least in part, on someone at the very bottom of the social ladder? The source material for today takes us right into the literal gutters to answer exactly that.
And our story starts deep inside the massive labyrinth of the Forbidden City with a man known as Lacquer Nail. Now, his backstory is just absolutely heart-wrenching. He was a married man who voluntarily castrated himself simply to earn enough money to save his severely ill son. But the second he enters the palace, he's just a pawn. To humiliate Lacquer Nail's mentor, the head eunuch, a cruel guy named Mr. Liu, completely strips him of any dignity. Lacquer Nail gets forced into this acrid, lie-soaked laundry room, and then he's assigned to clean up the absolute worst of the worst in the palace, hauling solid waste and rotting carcasses from the imperial kitchens. He is scrubbing these filthy, bloody barrels until his own hands bleed. But as we're going to see, this extreme degradation actually hones a profound kind of resilience.
Let's move to Section 1, The Empire Fractured, 1860 and the Anglo-French Invasion. As the Anglo-French forces advance on Beijing like this dark, unstoppable cloud, the empire literally cracks in two. On one hand, you've got a completely broken Emperor Xianfeng. He's convinced by a hardliner, Prince Sushun, to flee north past the Great Wall and set up a shadow court at the Rihei hunting lodge. And they actually try to frame this retreat as a hunting tour, if you can believe that. Meanwhile, on the other hand, we had the pragmatic Prince Gong, who's left behind in a besieged Beijing. He's handed this impossible mission, face down the invading British, French, and Russian forces, and somehow negotiate a way for the dynasty to just survive.
Which brings us to Section 2, Ashes of Paradise, the collision of the micro and the macro.
Now, as the court splinters, the tension between the retreating emperor and these invading forces really boils over into a devastating cultural clash at the Yuanmingyuan, famously known as the Garden of Perfect Brightness. To truly grasp the gravity of what was lost here, you have to consider the spatial and spiritual layout of imperial life at the time. The Yuanmingyuan is essentially the yin of the imperial world. It's a sprawling summer paradise entirely dedicated to sublime aesthetics, nature, and beauty, and it perfectly complements the yang of the Forbidden City, which is that symmetrical, rigid, and very solemn political center. They're literally two halves of the imperial soul.
But when those foreign troops break into this paradise, that yin is completely shattered. It's awful. French soldiers turn the garden into a charnel house of greed. They're smashing magnificent porcelain that literally symbolize the mandate of heaven, they're parading around in imperial silks, and they're using priceless ancient scrolls as ropes. Just unthinkable destruction. Then comes the fatal blow. Lord Elgin orders British forces to burn the whole garden to the ground as punishment for the death of Western hostages. Black smoke completely blots out the sun over Beijing. And the destruction of places like the Peony Terrace isn't just property damage, right? It's the absolute total collapse of a dynasty's dignity.
Yet, right in the middle of this fiery collapse, our lowly eunuch seizes a massive opportunity. During all the chaotic looting, Lacquer Nail manages to grab a rubied ceremonial sword and kills a looter, ultimately saving Prince Gong's aunt. That sheer act of bravery gets him an audience with noble consort Yi. And here's where it gets wild. During the panic, her extraordinarily long fingernail, which is a profound symbol of her elite status, breaks. So Lacquer Nail steps up. He uses his exquisite, precise lacquer skills, a craft usually reserved for repairing priceless vases, and flawlessly fixes her nail. That single meticulous act is his ticket out of the gutters. And that consort? She just so happens to be the woman who would later become Empress Dowager Cixi.
All right, Section 3, Diplomacy and Guns, the Pragmatist's Power.
While the Yuanmingyuan was literally burning and our eunuch was quietly securing his future, Prince Gong was still isolated in Beijing. He quickly realized that ideological purity wasn't going to save them. So he pulls off this masterful three-step survival strategy. First, he swallows his pride, yields to trade demands, and signs the treaties just to get the Anglo-French invaders out of the capital. Step 2, he cleverly plays the geopolitics game, using Russian influence as a diplomatic counterweight against the British and French. And Step 3, the big one, modernization. He realized he desperately needed the very same forces that had just defeated them.
So he goes ahead and builds the Western-trained and equipped Beijing Brigade.
So the crucial takeaway here is Prince Gong's guiding philosophy, which perfectly echoes that famous sentiment, power comes from the barrel of a gun. He didn't just stop at building a modern guard, he actually turned his former Western enemies into servants of the empire. He utilized foreign-led forces like the ever-victorious army led by officers like Charles Gordon and used their modern weapons and tactics to absolutely crush the massive internal threat of the Taiping Rebellion. Honestly, it was a brilliantly pragmatic maneuver.
And you have to remember, these crises are unfolding incredibly fast. We go from the terrifying advance of the foreign troops in 1860, straight into the emperor fleeing and the burning of the gardens late that exact same year. But the real match in the powder barrel, that drops in 1861. Emperor Xianfeng dies in Ruihei, lost in a haze of opium and debauchery. And his death instantly triggers an incredibly dangerous power vacuum at the very top of the empire.
Moving on to Section 4, the Xinyu Coup, the reordering of the world. Okay, so with the emperor dead, the incredibly arrogant Prince Sushun and his regency council up in Ruihei tried to seize absolute control. But they make a fatal error. They totally underestimate their political rivals back in Beijing. This massive miscalculation leads directly to the Xinyu Coup. It was a silent, incredibly swift, and entirely bloodless political takeover. You see, while the imperial funeral procession was slowly making its way back from Ruihei to Beijing, a secret alliance had already been forged between the pragmatic Prince Gong and the highly ambitious consort Yi. Together, they made their move to completely overthrow those 8 regents and totally restructure the empire's leadership.
The actual anatomy of Sushun's downfall is super fascinating. His own arrogance totally blinded him to this lethal combination. He completely missed the union of yin power, which was consort Yi's immense internal influence and manipulation within the palace, and the yang power, Prince Gong's modernized, heavily armed Beijing Brigade. The moment Sushun was separated from his military advantage during the procession, Gong's troops swooped in and swiftly arrested him. Sushun was executed, and literally overnight, the power dynamic of the entire empire was rewritten.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the Lacquer Nail, the micro-resolution.
With the coup successful, the dust finally settles on this new power dynamic. 2 dowager empresses now step up to rule from behind the curtain alongside Prince Regent Gong. And the former consort Yi, she transforms entirely. She is granted the title Cixi, which ironically translates to motherly and auspicious. It's incredible when you think about it. From a disgraced consort who almost lost absolutely everything in Ruihei, she vaults up to become the absolute most powerful woman in the empire, ruling over a fractured but still surviving nation.
And what about our eunuch? Well, picture this. In a quiet, snow-draped room in Beijing, the very same man who once scrubbed human filth until his hands literally bled is now summoned by the Dowager Empress herself. He kneels before her, carefully applying his exquisite lacquer craft to her extraordinarily long, curved fingernails. Remember, these nails are the ultimate symbols of her absolute authority, proving she lives a life completely untouched by manual labor. Through his unbelievably precise skill, Lacquer Nail has firmly secured his own survival. He reflects on his wild journey with this really powerful thought. He sees himself as a silent witness, a craftsman of lacquer in a world of broken porcelain. He watched the empire burn to the ground. He watched the ultimate power shift. And now he spends his days meticulously patching together the empire's fragile facade, exactly the same way he repairs a royal fingernail. He is the ultimate quiet survivor of this massive imperial machine.
So, as the snow gently covers the ashes of the Yuanmingyuan, I want to leave you all with one final thought to chew on. In a world built on fire, blood, and betrayal, just how fragile is the illusion of absolute power? Yes, the Qing Dynasty survived its absolute darkest hour through extreme pragmatism and some pretty ruthless ambition. But as Lacquer Nail knows better than anyone, that piece is every bit as delicate as the beautiful painted nails he tends to every single day. It really leaves you wondering just how long a world made of broken porcelain can actually hold together.